All those students are in the class. Now you ask me, how should I best teach them? Should I teach them from the point of view of the history of science, from the applications, My theory is that the best way to teach is to have no philosophy, is to be chaotic and confused in the sense that you use every possible way of doing it. That's the only way I can see to answer it, so as to catch this guy or that guy on different hooks as you go along. That during the time when the fellow who was interested in history is being bored by the abstract mathematics, on the other hand, the fellow who likes abstraction is being bored at another time by the history. If you can do it so you don't bore them all the time, perhaps you're better off. I really don't know how to do it. I don't know how to answer this question of different kinds of minds with different kinds of interests. What hooks them on? What makes them interested? How do you direct them to become interested? One way is by a kind of force. You have to pass this course. You have to take that examination. It's a very effective way. Many people go through schools that way. It is maybe the more effective way. I'm sorry, after many, many years of trying to teach and trying all different kinds of methods, I really don't know how to do it. I got a kick when I was a boy of my father telling me things, so I tried to tell my son things that were interesting about the world. When he was very small, I used to rock him to bed, you know, when he goes to bed. I'd tell him stories, and I'd make up story about little people that were about so high, would walk along, they would go on picnics and so on. They lived in the ventilator, and they'd go through these woods, which had great, big, long, tall, blue things like trees, but without leaves and only one stalk, and they were an all, and they had to walk between them and so on. And he'd gradually catch on, that was the rug, the nap of the rug, the blue rug. And he loved this game because I would describe all these things from an odd point of view, and he liked to hear the stories. And we got all kinds of wonderful things. He even went into a moist cave where the wind kept going in and out. It was coming in cool and went out warm and so on. It was inside the dog's nose that they went. And then, of course, I could tell him all about physiology by this way and so on. And he loved that, and so I told him lots of stuff. And I enjoyed it because I was telling him stuff that I liked, and we had fun when he would guess what it was and so on. And then I have a daughter, and I tried the same thing. Well, my daughter's personality was different. She didn't want to hear the story. She wanted the story that was in the book repeated again and read to her. She wanted me to read to her, not to make up stories. And that's a different personality. And so if I were to say a very good method for teaching children about science is to make up these stories of a little people, it doesn't work at all on my daughter. It happened to work on my son, okay?
Richard brings up good points. Richard is a smart guy. How do you become smart? How do you make the most of your mind? Curiosity is a starting point. If you have a curious personality, you can rely on it to lead you through life as a student, learning and problem solving out of reflex, out of appetite, natural desire. How can we encourage curiosity? How can we stimulate the appetite? We can start with giving it a standard. Let's look at what people are reading these days.
People in show business always worry, what's my next job? Comedian, I know my next job. My next job's talking about you. My next job's examining, the human condition and bringing light to it.
Chris Rock is the young Jedi master. He elevates the game.
You know, Chris does a very smart routine. In fact, he was mentioning things that the audience didn't know about. He had a very interesting point of view on wealth versus being rich and stuff like you're wealthy being, it's very, very good stuff. I actually said, man, you're educating these people. You know what I mean? I actually said that, and we talked, and I said, what do you read? He says, well, I read 3 newspapers a day. I have in my contract that I have to, when I get picked up, I gotta have 3 newspapers in the limo. And I read nothing but nonfiction. And I remember thinking, well, here's a cat who is got a GED, but he's interested in developing his mind, and as a result, his humor reflects that.
There's Chris Rock. Who else?
Johnny was the best read person I've ever known. You could not bring up an article, and certainly not a book, that he hadn't read. He had an enormous desire to be up on everything.
Would you welcome, please, to Carson's firing line, William F. Buckley, the unmellowed and unbowed Gore Vidal. Would you welcome Mr. Norman Mailer? Would you welcome, please, Dr. Carl Sagan? Would you please welcome the Apollo 13 team, James Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert.
There's Johnny Carson. Are there any rules of thumb? Are there any basic laws I can put in my pocket and pull out when I need to be reminded of how to use my curiosity?
In my early years as a fashion editor, I worked with Norman Parkinson, who was a really big photographer. And he taught me to always keep your eyes open, you know, never go to sleep in the car or anything like that. Keep watching, because whatever you see out the window or wherever, it can inspire you.
That's true. Look at everything. Can we be more specific? Maybe Kobe has something to say.
I remember I realized that I had to learn how to go coast to coast, because that's what John Battle from the Atlanta Hawks did. John Battle, like, you know, most people probably don't know who John Battle is, but I do, because from watching him get a rebound, go coast to coast with his left hand, even though he was right-handed, whoa, I need to do that. I wanted to do what those guys do on TV. You know, it was like this mythical thing.
Kobe says, look at obscure people in your field of study. That's a fantastic tip. What else? John Densmore. What does he think?
Elvin Jones gave me my hands, which he did. I copied all his style. And then I found my own. I think it gave me the courage to maybe... A drummer's job is to keep the beat, but then if you can be expressive, have a conversation with the singer or the soloist, you can push them. And I witnessed that with Elvin and Coltrane, and I pushed Jim Morrison because of those guys.
Okay, look at obscure people and famous people. What else? We've looked to our left and right at the people who do what we do. Athletes learn from athletes. Drummers learn from drummers. Where else can we look? Who else knows where to look? Garry.
The more you are Garry and the less you worry about the song you're singing, the more you'll be yourself. I think I'm getting more natural on stage and closer to a stand-up style that will really be me. I need to work on my space work. Commit to killing. Commit to the performance. Also, lose that stomach.
He always seemed like he was looking for answers. That was just the impression I got, which was different from any other comedian that I would run into. I don't get the feeling that most of them are looking for answers. They all have all the answers. I mean, I remember he was taking dance lessons. Did you know about that? He decided he was too stiff on stage, and he was taking, I don't remember if it was ballet or modern dance or something that I would never have been brave enough to do.
Wow. I like that. Garry is a stand-up comedian, and he's learning from a dancer. Comedians and dancers are in the field of performing arts. It makes sense that the lesson a dancer knows could be useful to a comedian. They both have to get on stage and captivate. This reminds me of something I read. D.W. Griffith, the director of Birth of a Nation, popularized the close-up. Before him, people held the camera back and would get someone's full body in frame, toes to head. This is during the black and white silent film era. Alan Dwan, who directed Robin Hood, said, I bet Griffith came up with the idea for the close-up by looking at Rembrandt paintings. He probably saw the paintings and thought, what a wonderful face! I have to get that on the screen. I don't know if this anecdote is true, but it's a fascinating idea. Allen would later say that he studied Rembrandt paintings for lighting effects. This is two sets of visual artists, painters and filmmakers learning from one another, new filmmakers learning from past painters. My next tip is to learn from completely outside your field. Listen to Marlon Brando give an acting tip using the boxer Jersey Joe as a metaphor.
When an actor takes a little too long as he's walking to the door, you know he's going to stop and turn around and say,
"Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn."
Jersey Joe Wilcott, terrific fighter. He'd be boxing, he'd be throwing some punches, and bing! He'd have his fist in somebody's face. You'd think it was going to come out of the southwest, and there it comes out of the northeast. He would never let you know where he was going to hit you.
You!
Never let the audience know how it's going to come out.
What is your name?
Get them on your time. Emiliano Zapata. And when that time comes and everything is right, you just fuck let fly.
Oh, judgment, thou art led to brutish beast, and men have lost their reason.
hit him, knock him over, with an attitude, with a word, with a look.
I don't like cops.
Be surprising. Figure out a way to do it that has never been done before.
You got to put something down. You got to make some jive. Don't you know what I'm talking about?
You want to stop that movement from the popcorn to the mouth.
Cry havoc! And let slip the dogs of war.
You get people to stop chewing.
That this foul deed shall smell above the earth.
The truth will do that. Damn, 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 damn. When it's right, it's right. You can feel it in your bones.
Then you feel whole. Then you feel good.
It was pre-60s. People were looking for rebellion, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time, with the right state of mind. In the sense it was my own story, rebelling for the sake of rebelling.
The way an actor delivers a line can be the way a boxer delivers a punch. Look for lessons outside of your field and you'll find metaphors that help you clarify your own theories on art. Always be asking, how is it that so-and-so approaches their craft? What's their attitude like, their technique, their style? What's it like? Next tip, look to other works of art for inspiration. John Coltrane, the jazz musician, wrote the song Alabama after a Baptist church was bombed in Alabama. He was inspired by the event, and he was inspired by the speech Martin Luther King Jr. gave on the occasion.
These children, unoffending, innocent, and beautiful, were the victims of one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity.
Coltrane himself told McCoy Tyner, his piano player, that he developed the melody out of a speech that Martin Luther King gave.
And today, as I stand over the remains of these beautiful, darling girls, I paraphrase the words of Shakespeare. Good night, sweet princesses. Good night, those who symbolize a new day. And may the flight of angels take thee to thy eternal rest.
Woody Allen came up with the idea for the film Manhattan while listening to the George Gershwin album Rhapsody in Blue. When he was listening to the album, he thought to himself, "This is beautiful. I ought to make a black and white romantic movie." Be inspired by all forms of art. As you do, you build your School of Athens. This is where you house your idols and mentors. In the middle is Plato and Aristotle. To their left and right are other thinkers. There is Socrates, who came up with the Socratic method, Pythagoras, who came up with the Pythagorean theorem, Euclid, who invented geometry, Ptolemy, who measured the distance to the sun, and Rafael, who painted the picture. This is from the Italian Renaissance. Now think of your favorite idols. Think of the art and artists that give meaning to your life.
Okay. For me, I would say, Groucho Marx, to name one thing, and Willie Mays, and the second movement of the Jupiter Symphony, and Louis Armstrong, recording of Potato Head Blues, Swedish movies, naturally, Sentimental Education by Flaubert, Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra, those incredible Apples and Pears by Cezanne, The Crabs at Sam Woe's, Tracy's Face.
I've got to make a plane.
Come on, you don't have to go.
Why couldn't you have brought this up last week? 6 months isn't so long. Not everybody gets corrupted. Look, you have to have a little faith in people.
Artists are lucky because they have so much wonder to go off of. Just as Woody Allen was inspired by George Gershwin to make Manhattan, you can be inspired by Manhattan to make something of your own. By being yourself, by responding to the things that resonate with you, you create newness. It's very exciting to make something new.
But the moment when I began to realize that I was now working on something new was when I read about quantum electrodynamics at the time, and I read a book and I learned about it. For example, I read Dirac's book, and he had these problems that nobody knew how to solve. It was described there. I couldn't understand the book very well because I really wasn't up to it. But there, in the last paragraph at the end of the book, it said, some new ideas are here needed. And so there I was. Some new ideas were needed. Okay, so I started to think of new ideas.